Welcome everyone to our SpedNet webinar, Does Your Child Have the Big 10 Life Skills with Julie Swanson. We're so pleased to have you joining us. I'm Eve Kessler, co-founder and executive director of SpedNet, and Ali Sheffers will be hosting this webinar. SpedNet was created over 20 years ago as a nonprofit to educate and empower parents of students with special needs to become their children's best advocates. In addition to our webinars and presentations, we have a terrific and easily accessible website with videos of all our presentations and webinars sorted by topic and speaker, as well as related articles and materials. We have published an excellent interactive guide to special services, bringing knowledge to the table, how to be an effective advocate for your child, free on our website with paperbacks available for purchase. If you have a student in the Wilton Public Schools, you may receive a paperback copy free of charge. Today, we welcome special education advocate Julie Swanson, who will discuss how the 10 domains of life skills are crucial for a student's independence and for increasing success into adulthood. Julie will explain how to begin this process as early as possible, as well as how to incorporate adaptive and life skills into your child's IEP and Section 504 plan. Julie has been a special education advocate for over 20 years, beginning with her efforts to help her son who has autism. As a disability specialist, Julie's practice is dedicated exclusively to helping parents of children with disabilities obtain appropriate services. She specializes in adaptive skills, assistive technology, and life skills products. Julie created YourSpecialEducationRights.com, a video-based resource for parents, and co-authored Your Special Education Rights, What Your School District Isn't Telling You, both with special education attorney Jennifer Laviano. Now known as the Life Skills Lady, Julie speaks frequently on special education matters and has an extensive history of service on special education-related Connecticut state boards and task forces, as well as legislative appointments. If you find our information and support helpful, please feel free to donate to SpedNet. We're a nonprofit organization, and all your donations go directly into programming. A couple of ground rules. Be mindful that this is an open forum and the presentation is being recorded, so we cannot guarantee confidentiality. You may not want to reveal any private information in your questions. The webinar video will be sent out by email in the next couple of days and also posted on our website and YouTube channel. Julie will take questions at the end of her talk. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A. It's easier for us if you use the Q&A and not the chat. Any information provided in the presentation is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice. Lastly, this webinar is presented in partnership with Wilton Public Schools and the Newtown SPED PTA. Thank you, Julie. We'll turn it over to you.
Eve, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And I am thrilled to be presenting on one of my favorite topics, and that is, of course, life skills. And just real quick, I've got a lot of slides. I don't like to read slides. Some of them I will be reading, and those are the ones that actually define the 10 domains of life skills. But I'm going to try to get through the slides as quickly as I can so we can, have some Q&A at the end. So why do we want to incorporate life skills into our child's IEP? Well, we know that intelligence does not predict how well we do as adults, but we know that life skills do. So life skills increase outcomes. It's been researched. There's not a lot of research on it, but there is research on it. And doesn't it just make sense, right? Okay. So I always like to tell, folks when we're at IEP meetings and people talk about life skills, well, we don't see that at school. Well, guess what? Your child isn't going to live at school. So life skills, yes, it's nice to teach life skills for what they need at school, but as you'll learn in this presentation, it goes far beyond the walls of the schoolhouse. So a little bit about post-secondary education and training, or transition. The very first paragraph of the IDEA talks about the fact that the purpose of the IDEA is to make sure that students with IEPs become adults who can increase outcomes and be successful in 3 areas: post-secondary education. So are you going off to college, community college, hairdressing school, a training program? That's post-secondary education or training. And also we want to make sure that students are ready for work. This happens to be my son. He he has autism. He's 28 now. He's quite impacted by his autism in that he has an intellectual disability and he's nonverbal. And this is, I put together a self-determination program for him. And he goes and helps out at a local horse farm around the corner from our house. And that's the person who works with him. So we want to make sure that our students are ready for work and or employment. And independent living. Here he is again. This is Alex. And those are all the skills we need to function in our day-to-day lives. So that's really what this webinar is all about, life skills. So life skills are often underestimated by school teams and by parents. And there's a bunch of reasons. One including that, life skills are only reserved for students with low IQs. I was once at an IEP team meeting for a former client of mine whose child was very high on the autism spectrum. Didn't say high functioning, high on the autism spectrum. And I asked for the life skills to be evaluated. And the team actually got very, very upset with me and said that I was, really underestimating him. And this was bad for his dignity to assess his life skills. That's the wrong answer. We can't assume that students with autism, especially autism, and other neurodiverse challenges and other developmental disabilities. Don't assume that your IQ is commensurate with your life skills. That's a big mistake that lots of folks make. The other one is that, we as teachers and as parents, we really do unintentionally, myself included, we end up masking a lot of skills for our kids because we end up doing for them. So this is another reason why we sometimes think, oh, my child's fine. He's got great life skills. Well, we sometimes don't realize that we do more for them than we think. And again, as I mentioned, life skills are not always commensurate with IQs. And just because somebody is getting good grades doesn't mean it translates into life skills. And lots of folks have said to me, oh my gosh, if I start teaching life skills, it's the beginning of the end. I've given up. All of these things I think are myths. And that's why the other one is parents and school teams truly don't always understand the full breadth of what life skills are. When I talk to people, I say, tell me what you think life skills are. And I'll always get something about hygiene and doing something in the kitchen. But that's just a small fraction of what life skills are, which you're going to learn about in this presentation. So what are life skills? They're also referred to as adaptive skills, activities of daily living, functional skills, and adaptive behavior. And I am going to read this one because life skills comprise everyday competencies, and they are defined as, and there are different definitions for them, but they're pretty much all the same. They're defined as the practical everyday skills needed to function and meet the demands of one's environment, including the skills necessary to effectively and independently take care of oneself and to interact with other people. When we think about it, you and I, if you're a typically developing person, we don't typically think about the life skills we have because they came to us naturally. We learned them through osmosis. We didn't even realize we were learning them. But for other folks, it may not be that easy. So life skills fall into three categories. This is where I'm going to read because they're defined. So the three categories are conceptual, social, and practical. And the first category is conceptual. And these are the skills that are actually the most challenging for many students because it requires applying insight into situations. And it includes reading, numbers, money, time, and communication skills. So one of the first life skill category under the domain of conceptual skills is communication skills. And this is understanding and using verbal and nonverbal language, speech, language, and listening skills needed for communication with other people, including vocabulary, responding to questions, conversation skills, etc. The next area under conceptual skills is functional academics. This is our ability to use reading, writing, and math skills in everyday life, and includes basic reading, writing, mathematics, and other academic skills needed for daily independent functioning, including telling time, measurement, writing, notes, and letters. And then, of course, the other category under conceptual skills is self-direction. This is a really big one that I think a lot of people don't think about. And that is our ability to be a problem solver, our ability to exercise choice, initiating and planning activities. And these are the skills needed for independence, responsibility, and self-control, including starting and completing tasks, keeping a schedule, following time limits, following directions, making choices, etc. This includes, our emotional regulation. So many students with IEPs have some, emotional regulation issues. All of these skills are included under self-direction. And in my 20 plus years of being an advocate, I think there's like three skills I really want folks to have: to be flexible and go with the flow, be a problem solver, and have control over our emotional regulation. I'm not saying that those are all of the skills, but those really fall into some of the top ones for me. Okay, the next category is social skills, and these are the skills we need to get along well with others, and they include understanding and following social rules and customs, obeying laws, and here's really important: detecting the motivations of others in order to avoid victimization and deception. Now, in today's world, and we have a lot of social media, and a lot of kids can become victims of things on social media and the internet. And all of that is included in this, right? Because as adults, we can get ourselves in a lot of trouble in these areas, potentially. So also social skills is under the social skills category, and that's maintaining interpersonal relationships, understanding emotions and social cues, understanding fairness and honesty, obeying rules and laws, and the skills needed to interact socially and get along with other people, including having friends, showing recognizing emotions, assisting others, and using manners. Often at IEP team meetings, school teams will say, well, we're not responsible for, Sally having a friend. No, of course, they're not responsible for having someone make a friend. However, it can be in the IEP that the student understands the skills they need to make connections, and that they have some skill level in order to do that. Just adding some color commenting as I'm going on here. This is one of my favorite ones: leisure skills. People hardly ever think about this. We all need to have leisure skills, right? We're not always working. What do we do in our downtime? And today, what do a lot of kids do in their downtime? It's called the computer. It's called social media, which is not always, it's got some wonderful things about it, but it can also be a minefield. So this is taking responsibility for one's own activities, having the ability to participate in the community, skills needed for engaging in and planning leisure and recreational activities, including playing with others, engaging in recreation at home, following rules and games, etc. The last category is practical skills. This is what people usually think of life skills, the practical skill domain. And these are the skills needed to perform the activities of daily living, including feeding, bathing, dressing, occupational skills, and navigational skills. And they include a self-care, and that's for, I just said all that, eating, dressing, bathing, toileting, grooming, hygiene, etc. And then it also includes home or school living. So this is maintaining our living space, including housekeeping, cooking, and laundry, the skills needed for basic care of a home or living setting, including cleaning, straightening, property maintenance and repairs, food preparation and performing chores, and community use. This includes shopping, using public transportation, also becoming a driver okay? Using community services, skills needed for functioning in the community, including use of community resources, shopping skills, and getting around in the community. And the last one, oh wait, no, this isn't the last one. There's one more after this. Health and safety, another one that folks don't really think about a lot, especially for our kids who have emotional disabilities, who have anxiety, depression. You know, when we become adults, we want to make sure that these kids are able to manage their own health, call the doctor, order their medications, etc. So this is the ability to protect oneself, medication management, responding to health problems, skills needed for protection of health and to respond to illness and injury, including following safety rules, using medications, and showing caution. And the last one is work. And this is the ability to maintain part-time or full-time employment, either competitive or ability to work under supervision, cooperate with coworkers, be reliable and punctual, and meet the work standards. So it's the skills. I like to say, you know, you not only need the skills to get the job, you need the skills to keep the job. So I'm going to stop reading verbatim, but I wanted to read those because those are the definitions, so to speak, of the 10 domains of life skills. Now, when we talk about life skills, it's really important to understand what transition to adulthood is. And not that this presentation is on transition, but I always find that so many folks don't really understand what transition is. And as I said in the beginning, it's the purpose for the IDEA is stated in the very first paragraph of the IDEA. And transition services means a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that is designed, oh, I've got to move this. Somebody read that first line for me because I've got my
It's designed to be within a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability. To facilitate, okay.
Oh, sorry, you can read, but to facilitate you, Eve, to facilitate the child's movement from school to the post-school activities. And that includes, you know, those driving statements about where do you want to land from a work perspective? Where do you want to land after you graduate for going on to school or post-secondary training? Where do you want to land for your independent living? And all of those statements drive the IEP, and it's the movement toward achieving that goal when you finally exit from special education, whether that's right after you're a senior in high school or going on now here in Connecticut to the 22nd birthday. And here in Connecticut, well, federally speaking, transition begins at 16, but here in Connecticut, a couple of years ago, maybe it's 2-3 years ago, the age was lowered to 14 here in Connecticut. So transition needs to start by 14. What you must know to prepare and plan. And this is not only for transition, but to prepare and plan to include life skills in your child's IEP. I want you, if you don't know what the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance are, this is the cornerstone of your child's IEP. Think of it as the foundation on which you build your house or you build the IEP. So the devil really is in the details when it comes to the present levels of functional performance, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, which can be called the PLAF or the PLOP, present levels of performance. So the definition of an IEP is it must contain a statement of the child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, including, okay, how the child's disability affects the child's involvement and progress in the general education curriculum, or for preschool children as appropriate, how the disability affects the child's participation in activities. And I'm going on to read something that I'm sorry I didn't put on the slide, and my apologies. When you are trying to ask for life skills to be included in your child's IEP, you're going to have school teams say, I'm just saying this is a popular answer, well, it doesn't impact your child's involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. And we don't see that at school. So therefore, we're not going to add that life skill. But what I'm going to read from you, which I'm sorry I didn't put on a slide, but I know Eve is going to link this, definition of an IEP on the website. It goes on to read, it is also a statement of measurable annual goals, including academic and functional goals, designed to meet the child's needs that result from the child's disability, to enable the child to be involved and make progress in the general education curriculum, and to meet each of the child's other educational needs that result from the child's disability. So I am coming up with a cheat sheet that will be available on my website shortly, that walks a parent through the conversation they should have with their school team if they get denied incorporating life skills. I also want to mention that I have on my website now, I put together the life skills IEP cheat sheet for IEP planning. And basically what this is when you're at a meeting, an IEP team meeting with your team, and you want to speak intelligently, eloquently about life skills and all the different categories, and to help explain why they do impact your child's involvement in the general education curriculum or other educational needs, they're all right there at a glance. So how do you establish the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance? The very first thing we do with an IEP is we have the statement of their present levels of academic achievement. How are they doing academically, and how are they functionally? Well, how do we figure that out? Well, we observe the child, we get feedback from the parents, and we do assessments. So these are not the one and only assessments. And by the way, these are all on my website, lifeskillslady.com. But popular assessments for looking at life skills include the Vineland Adaptive Rating Scales, the ABAS, which is the Adaptive Behavior Assessment System, the AFLS, the Assessment of Functional Living Skills, the ABLS, the Assessment of Basic Language and Learning Skills. And there's another one on here that is now on my website called Life's Essentials for Living. Okay. Also, just to go into transition here for a minute, if you're doing transition specific assessments, there are all sorts of transition specific assessments that include the Brigance. Again, I have these on my website, but these are the Ansel Casey assessment. There's so many of them, okay? There's a preponderance of them. But they will look at things like career and choice planning, employment knowledge and skills, further education and training, functional communication, self-determination, independent living, blah, 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 you know, leisure skills, health, interpersonal relationships. So these are ones that you can ask for before transition, right? For before transition purposes. And of course you could use them for transition as well. But once you get to transition age, there are transition specific assessments that you could also be asking for when you get to that point in your child's educational career. Once you've established the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, then IEP goals are developed. And where you have the weaknesses in the present levels of life skills, those are what turn into IEP goals and objectives, okay? So we first evaluate, we then write a statement about what the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance are, and then we develop IEP goals and objectives. I didn't talk a lot about it, establishing the academic achievement present levels, because I'm focusing on the life skills portion and functional skills. Let me just say really quickly a little bit about functional skills. The IDEA doesn't even define functional skills because they believe that it should be unique to the child's unique needs. But it's generally those skills we need to function in everyday life. And think about that. That includes an awful lot. So far you've learned what adaptive and life skills are. You've learned a little bit about transition, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, and assessments. So of course, now your next step would be to request an IEP team meeting. So you may have already started this process, but perhaps there are assessments that you haven't done, so you can ask your team to do further assessments. And now we're going to go into some questions, but I just wanted to go over some resources from me. That's my son Alex again, when he graduated from his private special education school, which he attended from the time he was 3 to 22. And of course, I have my website, lifeskillslady.com. You can follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, believe it or not, all at Life Skills Lady. Again, the website, yourspecialeducationrights.com, is a video-based website that helps parents understand their rights under the IDEA that I developed with attorney Jennifer Laviano. And we've got all sorts of, topics that we cover. And this is the book that I wrote with Jennifer Laviano, Your Special Education Rights, What Your School District Isn't Telling You. Another resource that I have on my website is 10 questions you probably aren't asking at your IEP team meeting. I actually love this resource. I collaborated with the Angel Sense, which is a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit that I use on my son. And a lot of times, people don't know that you can actually incorporate GPS into your child's IEP. So this is a resource that helps parents understand and work with the school team to say yes to GPS in the IEP. Oh, I do have it on here. And then my new brand new resource, the Life Skills Cheat Sheet for IEP planning. All you have to do is go to my website, sign up for my newsletter, and you can print that out for free. Jennifer and I also have a podcast called The Special Ed Files. And that's it, folks. So now we can open it up for questions. Should I turn off my Zoom, my presentation? Should I X out of that?
You can click stop share on the top.
Stop share. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Stop the share. Stop the share.
All right.
How do I do? Wait. Hold on a second, folks.
Yeah.
Stop. There we are.
Yes.
Okay.
The
I hope I didn't go through that too quickly.
That was quick. That was good. We have a few questions already.
Okay, great.
When you reference transitions, are you strictly referring to post-high school planning, or are these strategies parents can use for IEP planning at all stages?
I would say they could be used at all stages. The IDEA defines that transition, so that movement toward your goals for adulthood, right? For work, post-secondary education or training, and if appropriate, independent living, must start by 16 federally, must start here in Connecticut at 14, but there's nowhere in the IDEA that says you can't start it earlier. So I always like to, with many folks who may be a little bit more impacted by their disability, make a statement to the IEP team, say that we need to be focusing on transition to adulthood as early as we possibly can. And yeah, so, but it can clearly be applied earlier, but it must be in place by the federally mandated timelines.
And also when you're talking about transition, I think, there are so many things that come up when you're discussing transitions between schools.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that piece.
Totally different transition. I like to call it transition with a capital T, right? The big transition, the IDEA mandated transition versus going from one building to the next, which is just a change in a building.
And also a change in the amount of work or what,
And yeah.
what's expected in high school.
Right,
That
right,
can be a huge transition.
right. I mean, it's not just changing a building, it's changing teams, it's changing so much more, but yeah.
So the next question is, who would do the testing for academic and functional assessments? We had the Vineland done and the school district did not even go over it at the PPT.
Well, that's a problem. So, okay, typically when we're looking at academic achievement, we're looking at doing a psychoeducational evaluation that is typically shared between the school psychologist, who might do things such as, the WISC, the Wechsler intelligence scales, some sort of intelligence testing. You may be looking at behavioral assessments like the BASC. You may be looking at the Connors, which is, looking at attention and other behavioral issues. You might be looking at executive functioning, the NEPSI. So that would be, and again, these are just examples I'm giving you, okay? That would be typically what a school psychologist would do. Then typically you're going to have the special educator who is going to be doing perhaps the Woodcock-Johnson and other, which is an educational achievement assessment and other educational achievement assessments. Now we get into our life skills domains, right? And we've learned in this assessment that communication, right, and social skills are part of life skills. And that is typically done by the speech and language pathologist. Some of it can also be done by the social worker, depending on what aspect of social you're looking at. And then if you have OT, like occupational therapy, typically done by the occupational therapist, PT, typically done by the physical therapist. And as far as the life skills are concerned, that can be farmed out to different folks. Sometimes the school psychologist will do the adaptive assessments, whether it's the Vineland or the ABIS or one of the other ones. It certainly can be other folks on the team. I don't usually like to dictate who does it, but the school team will know who in their district has been trained and is able to do these assessments. Which, don't forget about observations and don't forget about your parent input.
What is the best referral to schools who ensure the skills noted and academic and transition?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you rephrase that?
Maybe who wrote that can type it in again and be a little bit clearer for us.
Okay.
For a very high functioning student, which assessments are the strongest for looking at those hard to capture and define but necessary skills, especially in the self-direction area? Most students miss some of these.
Yeah, I would say a lot of folks are really liking the essentials for living. And I would also say, you know what I say to parents? The ABIS is a good one, but I always say to parents, okay, go to my website, use this, right, as your guide, and you as parents come up with the lagging skills you think your child has in this domain. Because don't forget that this can also be your input. And who better than to define some of the lagging skill areas than you as parents, because you live with your child. And the AFLs I can't say that one is the best over the other, right? They all do a pretty decent job of looking at them. But I would say if there are any holes that any of them miss, that you need to be looking, you need to be telling the team, right? So for example, you might be the ones to say to the team, under health and safety and under self-direction, I really need to look at internet safety. Or under health and safety, I really need to look at sexuality because I feel my child is at great risk for victimization. Because those are typically areas that don't come up and people get a little uncomfortable talking about. I hope that answers your question.
I'm going to take the next one. It says, with students who go on to college, do the IEP accommodations follow? And how does that work? That's a whole another talk. And I'll let you answer as well. But just so you know, we have had that last year, which was done extremely well. And if you email me at info@spednet.org, I will send you the video for the talk we had. It was called The College Timeline, the Nuts and Bolts of the College Process.
Oh, wonderful.
And Janine Kelly did that last year. So
wonderful.
Feel free to answer more, but
sure. So
whole thing.
When it comes to transition goals and objectives, I always want students to have goals and objectives in the following areas: that they understand their rights under the IDEA, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 504, okay? Section 504 is an anti-retaliation bill, federal. ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And of course, when you are no longer part of the school system, you're no longer covered by the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So I want children and students to understand what are the basics of those laws and how do I fit into them as I have to go on and advocate for myself. When it comes to college, this is another thing that students really need to understand. In order to apply for accommodations under the ADA, you must disclose your disability. You don't just get to say, I need accommodations and you better give them to me. You have to go to the disability office of the college and apply for them. And one of the skills that really need to be in the IEP is what accommodations do you need and why? And the ability to be able to actually practice and follow through on that application process and talking with the person at the college. Because when you get to college, the ADA only has to give you what they think are reasonable accommodations. They get to decide, right? So you need to have a very persuasive argument why you would need a certain accommodation, but you must disclose your disability. What part of that question didn't I answer? Because I think there was another part of it.
No, the short answer is the IEP does not follow you to college.
Oh, thank you. It doesn't in that you can take the list of accommodations from that document and then bring them over to the new process, which is your application for accommodations at school. And also I need to say, this applies also to the workplace. When you are applying for a job, your student needs to figure out, am I revealing my disability before I get the job and say I'm going to need some accommodations? Or am I not? And then after I get the job, this is not easy stuff, by the way. These are all really difficult decisions. But in order to get accommodations, you're applying under the ADA, no longer the IDEA, So I hope that was helpful. But your presentation sounds wonderful too.
Yes, that was just a thorough example of how to go one by one and the accommodations and modifications through 504.
Right.
Hi,
Well, there are no modifications in 504.
The accommodations under section 504.
Yeah.
This one is, hi, Julie. Thanks for a terrific presentation. I am listening from South Burlington, Vermont, where we moved to Norwalk last year. I
Oh,
have
nice.
two girls aged 12 in 7th grade at the public middle school here. We got report cards from the school for Q1. One criteria they use to evaluate kids is habits of work, HOW. My
Okay.
one twin with a 504 who struggles with executive function skills said last night that her being evaluated on habits of work is unfair because school thinks kids all function at the same levels. What do I do?
Okay. Well, first of all, you can have an IEP meeting and discuss why you think it's unfair. I don't know what the specific habits of work include as the criteria, but it's a great discussion point because at the end of the day, right, if your child can't meet what those habits of work are, then you need to define what those deficits are and create IEP goals and objectives to help her close the gap on that skill and to have that skill. So that's one thing. There's a really great assessment that you can get right online by Dr. Ross Green called the ALSUP, which is the Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems. You can also ask for an observation to be done or an ecological assessment. What is an ecological assessment? That is when somebody is observing your child and another typically developing peer to see how your child compared to the typically developing peer reacts to the demands of that environment. So as an example, if a teacher says, okay, class, go to chapter 13 and go to page 48 and read between 48 and 56. And that typically developing peer does that within a minute and a half, let's say. And that's in line with most of the other students. But your child is like at minute 3, still looking around, wondering what the heck I don't even know what to do because I may not be able to follow multi-step directions. Now we've identified that your child is having a hard time following multi-step directions, right? And so now you need to have an IEP goal to follow multi-step directions. And then while they're learning that, have accommodations in the IEP that are going to direct the teachers to how do we react with this child because we know she doesn't have this skill. What are we doing to accommodate her? The other thing is oftentimes I like to tell parents that asking for an ecological assessment and getting a baseline on the level of prompting that a child is receiving is a really great way to establish whether or not your child requires a paraprofessional or an aide. Because you can't, I always don't like to ask for an aide as an emotional ask. You want an aide or a para to be a data-driven decision. You have to come to the team with the data. Here are the skills my child does not have. By the way, if they've never done the NEPSI, and I always forget what that stands for, but it's an executive functioning assessment. You need to go back to the IEP, write an email that says, I really appreciate the fact that you evaluated my child's executive functioning and these skills, but they were never reviewed at an IEP meeting. So I would like to do that. By law, they must be reviewed at the IEP team meeting because that assessment should update your present levels of functioning. And you can't have an IEP goal for something if they never fell onto your present levels. So I hope that's helpful.
She follows up by saying, and an example of HOW is handing in assignments on time, which she struggles with, depending on what the assignment is. For example, currently she's late with submitting an ELA assignment that is heavy on writing about evaluating characters, finding quotes to support that and write a lot of detail, which is very hard for her as so many executive function skills are required in order to finish this assignment.
Right. So this is why she needs to do exactly what I just was saying and to establish that these are weaknesses that they're lagging skill areas and go to the IEP team meeting and ask for IEP goals to be developed, obviously after updating the present levels to reflect the weaknesses in these areas. And then you have to decide, well, how does that weakness impact my child's education? Well, she's not able to hand things in on time due to her disability. Therefore, we need the accommodation and we need a goal to help her develop that skill. Good luck.
We are looking for a resource to recommend schools for these particular special needs.
What you mean life skill needs?
For life skills.
Well, it would also depend on what disability the child has. A lot of private state-approved special education schools in Connecticut are usually designed for a certain cohort of students, right? So if you're going to Milestones, as an example, in Milford and Orange, you're going to be looking mostly at kids who have autism. If you're looking at what's one of the schools for learning disabilities down in Fairfield County?
Southport Eagle Hill.
There you go. You're typically looking at kids who have learning disabilities, ADHD, that type of thing. So it might be helpful if I knew the disability, but what's even more helpful is, and I can certainly after this give the link to Eve, but here's what I want you to Google. Google Connecticut state-approved private special education schools. And the list of schools should come up, and you can then research them to figure out if it looks like it meets the profile of your child.
That's an excellent idea. I have one more so far. When should you begin to start talking about transition with your school, and what should they be offering the student?
As early as is possible. I would say if you have, especially for a child who is far more impacted by their disability as it relates to their life skills. If you've got a child who has a learning disability, as an example, they may be totally intact with, life skills. So many times it is often kids who are more impacted by their disability, which is a little bit more obvious that, oh my gosh, these are going to be deficit areas, right? But either way, you can say, look, I want to discuss at every single PPT we go to, or IEP meeting, for those of you who are not in Connecticut. I want to discuss the skills that are going to lead to adulthood. And I want to keep my eye on the ball on life skills and have this with you at all times and be referring to this. But I would say that you need to be discussing it as early as possible. I'll just talk about my own son here for 1 minute. So Alex has autism, has an intellectual disability, is nonverbal. By the way, he's fabulous and he's wonderful in every single way. He was a life skills kid from the get-go, right? And we started working on life skills with him when he was, preschool, kindergarten. And we worked on it all the way through. And as a result, even though Alex is more impacted by his autism, I'm not going to say low functioning or high functioning, but he's more impacted by his autism. He has a wonderful life and has a meaningful life and has purpose. I have no doubt in my mind, because of all of the life skills that, pertain to him in these areas. No doubt about it. There is a direct link between your advocacy efforts for your child and their outcome. And there's a direct link to increased life skills in increased not only outcomes in adulthood, but our, it's not called the happiness quotient. What's it called? Quality of life. Think about it. All of the skills that we have to get us through a day that we don't even think about: our planning, our executive functioning, our time management, our ability not to get angry with someone if we don't agree with them. And we have the ability to have emotional regulation. We have the ability to make our own decisions. And again, for my son, Alex, who is, as I said, more impacted by his disability, he doesn't have all of these things independently, but he still has many of the skills that are sort of modified to his own profile, if you will. So I hope that helps.
I think we don't have any more questions.
Oh.
Anybody? That was a lot
6
of
minutes to spare.
Those were excellent answers to, here's one more. How do you talk to a spouse or close family member about your child when they don't really understand that skills they assume are natural, like being punctual, for example?
Well, this is a perfect opportunity for me to talk to you about the most highly underutilized related service under the IDEA, and that's called parent training. So what are our related services? We have transportation, speech and language, OT, PT, blah, 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 including parent training, which is a very poorly named entity. I don't like the name of it because it assumes that parents need training. That's actually not what it means. It means that you have the right to understand your child's disability, and you have the right to understand it so that you can help support their IEP. Of course, it's an abridged version of what it is. So there's two things I'm going to tell you. Number one is, if you've got a spouse who's not really getting it, say, you know what? I would love to have some parent training with some members on the school team who can explain our child's disability, how that impacts her, and what we need to know to help support her. So in this way, it's not coming from you, which I know sometimes being married, that, somebody might, your husband or your wife or your significant other may not listen to you, but maybe they'll listen to somebody else. You can certainly ask for parent training. But the other thing that I'd say to you is, if you have a spouse or a significant other or partner who isn't getting it, again, I'm just speaking personally, how I'd react is say, well, maybe we need to go see a counselor. I mean, somebody is going to be the intermediary for you, because if they're not open to hearing it from you, perhaps they will be from other professionals.
We also have a presentation coming up that might be helpful for that. It's called Being on the Same Page: How
Ooh.
Parents Can Remain Effective Partners When Raising Kids with Special Needs. And that's on March 1st. It's in person in Wilton with
Oh, wow.
Kellogg, but that might be helpful.
Yeah, you sign up for that
And if
one.
you can't go, you'll have the
Yeah.
webinar video for it.
And one more thing to add to that, the school district had to have done evaluations on your child. And maybe your spouse has never read those, but not only have him read those, or her, right? But also, again, make that part of the parent training. I need the school psychologist to explain to you why low executive functioning skills are going to impact their ability to be on time or plan or whatever it is.
Any more? And yes, the answer to all of our presentations and webinars are videotaped and recorded and posted on our website. That's a response to whether the March 1st will be recorded too.
Okay. I do hope that everyone has learned a little something about life skills today, and that they're more than making a sandwich in the kitchen and being able to take a shower. And I will say one more thing. So here in Connecticut, we have a new IEP form. It's called Connecticut SEDS. Don't ask me what the SEDS part stands for, but it's something. I should know that. I was actually on the committee to form the new IEP form. It's taken many years to do this. And what's really lovely about the new form, and there's a lot of things about it that I may not agree with, but one of the really great things that came out of it, and overall it's very good, but there are some things that I think folks around, stakeholders around the state certainly want to give the state some feedback on. But one of the lovely things about it is that it doesn't separate the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance are right before the IEP goal. So you could see the link. Now, one of the things that it doesn't do, right, is on the current IEP form, on that it says the domain. So it will say behavioral, social, emotional, academic, math, academic, language arts, communication, social. It doesn't spoon feed us what the actual categories of academic achievement are and functional performance, which is why I'm going to go back to this. This is so important because you can say to your team, I need a functional performance area for self-care. I need a functional, we need to have a functional performance entitled self-direction. So this is why this is also so important. And I really do hope it helps folks.
That was very, very helpful. And we will send that out the way you said.
Yeah.
We, just so folks know, we did have a webinar about the new IEP, Connecticut's new IEP, with Jeff Forte and Jill Hornig, making sense of Connecticut's new IEP page by page. And that is also on our webs. Yeah, on our website, explaining that.
Yeah, that was excellent. It's a lot. And, you know, from what I understand from attending so many IEP meetings around the state is there's a lot of glitches, giving some folks a hard time, but it'll eventually get there.
That was excellent. That was so helpful, Julie. Anybody else? Last questions before we say goodbye? Okay.
I don't know if my passion for life skills was showing during this presentation.
I think it was totally showing. That it was excellent.
Oh, I have so enjoyed being with you, Eve and Allie, and really, I'm honored that you asked me to present.
Thank you. And I think that the question and answers really fleshed out the presentation because of how much more you can go into detail when there are very specific questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Sure,
doing it.
of course. It's my pleasure.
1 second.
Bye, everybody.
Hold on 1 second. Oh,
Okay, maybe not.
Thank yous.
Oh,
One more. I'm sorry.
Oh, one more.
When should we be having the new IEP form for our students?
Good question. Yeah, so this like varies a little bit from district to district, but generally what the state has told them, and don't quote me verbatim, but this is what I'm hearing, is they're going to continue to use the old IEP form until you have your next annual review. And then that's the clean slate where they will put it on the new form. Now, certainly, could you ask for it to be on the new form? Of course. The caveat to that is school districts are really struggling, and not because of themselves, but because there are so many problems with the software. So I would just say be patient with your school districts around this, because they really are struggling. And, you know, I was just on a meeting yesterday where the director said, you know, Julie, please be patient with us. We, you know, I'm going to try to input XYZ on ABC. I put in a call ticket, and the call ticket, the people from the technical assistance area won't be getting to her for a week. So it's one of those things that we just all have to be a little patient.
Just more. Oh, everything else is thank yous. Fantastic presentations. Thank you.
I'm so glad.
Thank you from us. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Allie, thank you.
Thank you guys.